Okay, so for this course, there's a requirement to have a project, submit a project by the end of the semester, and you can work in groups of up to 3. Did we go over these requirements? I forget. You haven't, right? Okay. So I have a minimum set of requirements, but out of if you stay within these boundaries, you're pretty much free to do whatever you want. But they all should have a certain level of complexity, and the level of complexity will be that you should all have at least a couple of inheritance. You should have a couple of associations. You should have a couple of one to many, many to many. So there's several types of relationships that need to be there. Enumerations have to be there. Compositions have to be there. Aggregations. So there has to be an example of each one of the concepts that we have been going over in class. Okay? The other aspect will be that there will have to be at least 2 types of users that use the system. The 2 types of roles, say, right? And each and you have to create the data model for each one of them, right? And so this just complicates the implementation because each one will have different types of use cases and all the data structure to support that particular use case, right? And also, depending on the size of your team, the complexity grows proportionally. Right? So if you just one, then one person, then it'll be 2 types of users. But if you're 3, then we'll add an additional user for every additional team member. Another requirement will be that you need to use some third-party API, whatever third-party API you choose. It could be Amazon, it could be Barnes & Noble. Are they still around? Yeah. And you can use Best Buy, Walmart. They all have a really good APIs for whatever you can. If you can think of some data, there's some API out there that allows you to retrieve it. You're not required to use any paid API. There's plenty of free APIs out there. Yes.
When you say API, is it with regards to the data or with regards to how you are implementing?
Ideally, it will be real data, okay, that can be retrieved dynamically on demand. I will accept if you have a data that you have is not accessible through an API. For instance, NOAA and some Food and Drug Administration, some of these large databases, right, allow you to dump the data in XML format or JSON format or comma-separated format, right? And they just don't have an endpoint that you can query it dynamically, right? So those would be legitimate cases that hey, there's no data, but they provide it to me. It doesn't change very often, right? And here it is, and then you can maybe import it into your database. That would be a legitimate case. Yes, and if you have that case, please see me first. If that's the case. Okay. Where was I? Also, there's an admin role. So whatever use case, whatever types of users you can think of, one of them, additional to that, you need an admin role. This admin role should be able to manipulate everything, right? Everything to its broadest interpretation, but the use cases of the admin will not be the same use cases of an end user. Okay, whereas an end user can create a single record, manipulate their own records, list the records that they've created. They can maybe navigate from one parent record to several children records. Yes, an admin should be able to list all the records across all users. Okay, so they should be able to see all records for an entire table, right, and edit an individual record. Okay, now the user interfaces for either user doesn't have to look spectacular like you would for if you're actually going to put this in the market, right? It is okay that they would be tabular, lots of tables. That's okay. It's okay if you don't split it across multiple pages, right, or multiple user interfaces. It could be they have to be functional. They have to be presentable, right? But it's not a web course, so we're not going to spend time making things look pretty, and it has to be functional. It has to be presentable. So I don't want something ugly, right? So make any effort that you can to make it presentable, right? Let's see. Okay. So let's take a look at the requirements. So at least two types of human end users. Two types of human end users. Okay. So for instance, if it's a store application, there'll be a seller and a buyer. If it's a project management application, you could have developers. You could have somebody who's a quality assurance. There'd be a project manager, business analyst, and each one of them would have to have their own set of use cases, right? Some use cases might overlap, but there should be at least one use case that it's not the same, right, between them. And there should be a user interface specifically for that use case. Yes? Could be one page or multiple pages. I don't want to say page because it doesn't have to be a web project. It could be, if you, usually there's always one or two folks that want to do phone application. That'd be totally cool. And also there's always two or three folks that want to do just a desktop application because they're good at Java Swing or some other desktop UI. That's totally fine. Let's see, if you're an online restaurant, it could be cooks, waiters, delivery, receptionists, managers, owners, online sports. A lot of people pick restaurants and sports, right? Or like a movie place, right? And if you could think of something else, anyway, but sports, players, coach, directors, spectators, fishing journal, like fishermen, university students, faculty, staff. Let's see. Right, the user interface should represent the use case. Right, you could decide that that entire use case is implemented in one single view, right, whether it's a page or not, or you might want to split it, but it's fine if it's just one. Okay, that all the user interface can be there. So in addition to those two users. In addition to those two users, it has to be an admin role, right? Somebody who not necessarily they're not using any of the user interfaces that the regular users use. Right? They would have their own user interface. Right? Most of it will be lots of tables. It's okay for them to be really, really long tables. That's okay. Right? If you want to add pagination, even better. But I don't see that. Well, that would force you to use limits and so let's add the requirement of having some form of pagination. Okay, some form of pagination. And so the admin should be able to do all the CRUD operations on all the tables. Okay, so they should be able to see all the tables and edit them from within the from within the UI. Anonymous user requirements. So you should also support anonymous users, right? Folks that have not identified themselves. Right? They should be able to do something, right? Probably not very little, perhaps, but they should be able to do something. Say you come to a restaurant, at least I should be able to look at the menu, right? And or if I go to a movie site, I should be able to just look around movies and maybe read reviews. But if I need to create something, then you need to force me to log in because I need to know who you are, right? So that brings in the user management requirement. There's a user management requirement that folks need to be able to identify themselves, to log in, to register. Certainly the admin role should be able to create new users, right? Delete users. Okay. Additional roles and domains. If you are a graduate student and you are any undergraduates, yeah. Right. So if you're an undergraduate, your requirements are slightly less than the graduates. So, for instance, if you're one team, one-person team, then certainly you need to have an admin, an anonymous role, and role one, a one-human role. Okay, in addition to anonymous and admin. But if you're a graduate, you need to have at least 2 roles. Okay, I'll come to domain objects in a minute. If for every additional team member, we add an additional role, role 2, role 3, whereas graduate will be role 3, role 4. Okay, domain objects are objects based on whatever domain you choose. Right. So for a restaurant site, that might be a menu, might be a particular dish, maybe an order, or a table, or not customer, non-human objects. So domain objects are non-human objects. Okay. Right. So they're the modeling of users, and there's the modeling of non-humans. Okay. So a domain object is anything that is not human. So if this is if it's a movie site, then so certainly movie would be a domain object. A theater might be a domain object. Maybe a playlist might be a domain object. Okay, collections of things might be other domain objects. So for if you're one person, you have to have at least 2 domain objects. Right? So for instance, like maybe it's a recipe or food thing, that website where you might have many recipes, and each recipe might have multiple steps, right? And you might have ingredients. So an ingredient is a domain object. A particular step is a domain. It's a domain object. A recipe is a domain object, right? A collection of recipes is also another domain object. Yes. So you have to have at least 2 if you're one person. Yes.
Like in last assignment, web pages is one kind of domain.
Yes.
Pages and then widgets.
Right. In that example, websites, pages, widgets, those are all domain objects. Yes. Yep. Require data model. So you need to capture the data for a user. Right, to represent admins, the different types of people, their roles, right? You need to capture a domain object to represent domain objects, at least 2, or 3 or 4, depending on how many team members there are. In the relationships, you have to have at least 1 user-to-user relationship. Okay. For instance, somebody might follow somebody might send a message to somebody might be somebody's boss. Okay, so some kind of relationship between a user and another user. Okay. you have to have at least one user-to-domain object relationship. I like a movie, so that's a relationship between a person and a movie. Okay. I create a review on a movie. That's another relationship, right? This person wrote this review on that movie, right? That's a relationship, a user-to-domain relationship. Plus, you need to have at least one domain-to-domain relationship, right? So domain object to another domain object, right? Maybe a recipe is made up of many steps. A recipe has many ingredients, right? So those are relationship between domain objects. Yes? So you have to have at least one relationship like that. At least one-to-many relationships, right? So again, a recipe has many steps, many ingredients. Okay? At least one many-to-many relationship. Okay, like well, this is a user to actors to movies. Right? One actor can be related to many movies, has acted in many movies, but one movie has many actors. Right? So at least one many-to-many relationship there. Okay. Also, you need to have at least one generalization, right? Where you have a base class, right? You might have multiple other objects that inherit from that. It could be that that's how you implement multiple users. You might have a base person, right? And then you might have a faculty and a student, both of them inheriting from person. That would be it. If you do that, you have to guarantee that the derived classes have to have at least one attribute that is different from other derived classes. Okay? Don't derive them just to derive them. They have to have something that's special about them, make them to create specialization. So here are some very generic. Here's a very generic class diagram that tries to capture everything. So here you have an aggregation between a user and another user. Here's an inheritance of two users inheriting from a base person, a one-to-many relationship between a user and a domain object, a one-to-many relationship between a domain object and another domain object, one self-reference. Ooh, I forgot self-reference. I'll write more onto that. So self-reference meaning that you have a hierarchical relationship, right? Maybe we're managers, right? I'm a manager. I manage multiple other folks, right? We're both on the same table. We're all users, but I am a manager of other users, and somebody else might be manager of some other users, right? So it's kind of like a recursive relationship there, right? Or products. Products might be also in a hierarchy, right? Where you might have a category, subcategory, subcategory, right? So you kind of have like a tree where the leaves are the actual products, right? But the branches are just categories. Yes? So you achieve that by doing self-references, right? Where a table has a foreign key to itself, right? Points to itself. Yes? Or you can also have a reference where you can have an association outside that references that has two pointers back to the original table. Right? So this table referencing itself. So you can either do it like this, where it's a user-to-user association. Right? So this could be a manager, and these are specific things about a manager. Right? Or you can do it as a self-reference, right, where you have a foreign key to your primary key, right, in the same table. Okay. Here's just a couple of a couple. Oh, Oh, they're broken. Oh, this is in RH Cloud. Okay, I moved this. It lives somewhere else. I'll update the URLs. Can I make this bigger? No. Okay, I can't. Where you have here buyers and sellers. Here's a many-to-many relationship of buyers sending messages to sellers, sellers sending messages to buyers, of a seller having many stores. Within that store, they have many products. Products are arranged in categories. A buyer can write a review on a product. So here's a many-to-many saying that this buyer wrote this review on that product. Okay, a buyer can follow other buyers. So there's a many-to-many relationship between follows. This has two foreign keys pointing to the buyer, saying that this buyer is following that other buyer, right? And seller and buyer are both people, right? And they inherit from this person. Here's another one where you have faculty and students sharing a data model that they can send messages to each other. A faculty can teaches many sections. Each section has a course can have many sections. A student is enrolled in many sections. And the faculty can author many courses, and a course can be authored by many faculty. Right? And again, students and faculty are both people. Here's another one. You can have artists and curators are both inheriting from people in an art gallery, and a curator can curate multiple galleries. And you choose the art that they're going to show in that gallery. They can generate exhibitions in a gallery, and an exhibition can have multiple instances of art pieces. Right, and that art piece can be many types of art types. Right, it can be hand drawings. It can be a performance. It can be a photo, video, audio, written poems, different types of art. The artist can organize, just keep track of all the pieces of art that have generated, but they can also organize those pieces of art into a portfolio, right, where a portfolio can have references to many pieces of art. That can be referenced also by the exhibitions. So there has to be some screen that it's kind of like some landing page or some landing that might explain what it is that you're asking me to do with your application. Some means of logging in and registering. There should be a dedicated view where I can see all the information about me when I register, when I log in. Again, it could be lots of tables, right? That show everything that I am associated with, right? So if I wrote a review, or or I'm following somebody, or if I don't like certain products, or anything that is associated to me as a person who's logged in, should somehow be displayed here in the profile, or at least links that allow me to go to see those things that I am associated with. Yes? Right? So if for instance, if I'm following folks, I should have a list here of everybody that I'm following. If people are following me, I should see people are following me. Any posts, blog posts that have generated, any recipes that have created, any sports teams that I'm a fan of, anything that is associated to me, somehow it should be represented here in the profile. Right? That it should give me access to. I click and I can navigate to that thing that is associated to me. Okay. There's no need to think here of privacy that I can go to somebody else's profile. I can read all their stuff. Again, we're not, we're just manipulating data, right? We're creating user interfaces, implementing certain use cases. Again, this is not meant to be marketed and in no way. So again, we want to focus on the data modeling and manipulating of that data. Some mechanism that allows me to search something, search recipes, search sports, sports folks, and the latest scores, and allows me to view those results from a remote API or some data that you have imported from some database. Okay, and it allows me to have two views. One of them is a summarized view, right, that it might give me maybe a one line or two lines summary of a result set, and you can have multiple result sets. Maybe 10, 20 results, maybe paginated. Here's a good place to put pagination, maybe. But if I click on one particular result set, it takes me to some detailed version of that result set. Right? If it's a movie, maybe it'll show me a poster, maybe the director, actors, the plot, anybody who has reviewed that movie, what Rotten Tomatoes says, Metacritic, whatever. Or if it's a piece of food, maybe it'll show me the dish, multiple pictures of a dish, right? How it looks like. The details page. Again, there has to be either a web service, or instead of a web service, some data dump that you've gotten from somewhere. Okay, a good place to take a look at where you can find data is programmable web. Programmable web is a repository of APIs where you can query to see if are there data APIs out there that I can use, and you just point to it and start querying for data. Most of these, a good chunk of these APIs require you to apply, right? For an API key for them to give you access to their data. They want to know who's using their data, yeah. And some of them are immediately, and they send you an email with the API key. Some of them might take a couple of days. So I would do this now. This research, go to programmable web or just search on Google, right? An API on whatever topic interests you. Okay, there's a real cool one that my son loved. That was Pokemon. There's this API that has everything you want to know about Pokemon, and there are games that you can play on using these APIs, and you have all the monsters, all the Pokemon are there. With all the different powers and whatnot. It was really, really cool. That was a lot of fun. But yeah, so look up anything that interests you. As long as you're within these constraints, I'm okay with any topic you choose. Okay. Some folks find it hard to come up maybe with 2 or 3 or 4 different roles. Okay. So we can negotiate, and it says, well, instead of an additional role, can I instead do this? I'm open to negotiation. The most common thing that I'll say is that I'll trade you one role for a web service. Okay, so I think that's a fair trade. Complexity-wise. So instead of using one web service, maybe use 2 web services. Right, so use another some data source, another data source, 2 data sources, right? So I think that's a fair trade. What else? If the project that you're thinking of does not fit inside of these constraints, and you think it's much more interesting than what I'm proposing here, please see me. I'm open to new things, new ideas. But I think that 80% at least of the project are going to fall within these constraints. right? And I'm willing to deal with the edge cases, right? So if you think you have something more exciting, then certainly I'm open to considering it. So some of the deliverables. The certainly use a UML tool for the design, and this will be Spring 2018. All the source code needs to be submitted on GitHub and on a repository named as such, CS5200 Spring 2018, last name, first name, and you'll submit the link to that repository. In that repository, you need to have several wiki pages, one of which will be the design. Right? In that design, you'll show your UML class diagram, right? A project statement. The UML diagram needs to show the classes, the cardinality, relationships. You need to create when you're going to submit this. You need to create these users, right? Alice with username and password, admin, Alice, Bob, Charlie, and Dan. Well, it depends how many users you needed to create, depending on how many team members in your team. And they will be the different roles, right? Also, you'll create a wiki page with detailed steps on how you want us to grade you. Okay, we will log in as Alice, and we'll follow your instructions. Okay, your instructions need to. The instructions have to prove that you implemented certain requirements. I said, show me where did you have the one-to-many between users and an object model, a domain object. Show me where is the many-to-many of one domain object and another domain object. So you will write these use cases step by step, saying, well, here's how I want you to test the many-to-many. Log in as Alice, create a recipe, add an ingredient to that recipe, right, or whatever, and then add the same ingredient to another recipe. Okay, that's a many-to-many, right? Multiple things, and okay, check, that worked, right? So we will ask you to give us in a wiki page called testing, detailed steps on how you want us to test, and we will follow your steps. Okay, we won't try to break your code. After we go through your testing, then we'll start maybe do some random things here and there, right? Just to do some smoke testing, right? Hopefully everything will be okay. Nothing will break tragically. And so here are the test scenarios that we need from you. Also, a 5 to 10 minute video. I used to have everybody present. The last day, it just took too long. And so instead, we'll ask you like a 5 to 10 minute video where each one of you, each member of the team, needs to speak for 2 or 3 minutes, presenting something about their project. Yes, right, and then upload it to YouTube, and you can make it private. It's okay, right? You can send me the URL, and the URL you'll need to submit it. And also at the end of semester, I'll send a form. I'll send you a form, and that form will say who the folks in the team were, all the URLs to the repository, the URLs to test this online, to the wiki page and everything, right, for us to follow you, all the users and whatnot. Yes? What else? I think that's it. Any questions? Yes. No. You can use Well, there has to be a database. There has to be some middle tier, but the front end could be anything you want. So the middle tier, you can choose whatever you want, as long as it's Java. No, you can use whatever you want for the middle tier. For the front end, you can use anything you want. For the back end, some either NoSQL or MySQL. Ideally, there will be some ORM in between there. Let's see. Don't use flat files. No XML and no JSON, meaning flat files, JSON flat files. Meaning the data has to be stored in a database. You can use JSON files for testing or importing data, things like that. Yes.
What about APIs that return JSON data?
Yeah, totally fine. Yes. I'm sorry.
So we have to get our data from some API, but also the API data has to
Yeah, let's go over that real quick.